All right, we got a really fun one today, from The Newsroom, To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway, Dumb and Dumber, and now playing James Comey in The Comey Rule. We've got Jeff Daniels, and the writer for some huge movies, Hunger Games, Captain Phillips, Richard Jewell, and now the writer and director of The Comey Rule, we've got Billy Ray. Thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and congratulations on the series, by the way. I had a chance to watch. I was glued to the screen. What a monumental success this turned out to be.
Thank you.
Right off the bat, let's talk about James Comey. You know, in a political environment where everyone is hated by half the country, you managed to find the one guy who everybody hates. So why'd you guys decide to jump on this landmine?
I had been wanting to say something about the Trump presidency and our democracy more broadly ever since the moment he was elected. And then I got a call from a producer named Shane Salerno saying, would you like to adapt the Comey book? This was the night before it had been published. I said, send it to me right now. And I read it overnight. And I said, and I realized, oh, this is the way in. This is the way to talk about the Trump administration through the eyes of a public servant, and a chance to talk about how heartbreaking it can be to be a public servant. And then the only trick was writing the script and getting a great actor to play him. And luckily, both those things happened.
Yeah. So did your feelings about Comey, and this is for both of you, I guess, change after being involved in this series?
Jeff, you can start that one.
I learned a lot about him. Billy and I went into this going, let's show him how he thinks. And because that was kind of in October 2016 when he reopened the investigation, there were many people, me included probably, I just don't remember, going, what is he thinking? What is he? Well, this film shows you what he was thinking and what he was up against, and the struggle between a rock and a hard place that Jim Comey found himself in constantly. I had no idea about that. I had no idea that he was in a way forced to do it this way. Always, though, the North Star for him was the same. It was truth, justice, and rule of law, and in particular, to protect the integrity of the FBI. Those things were all bigger than Jim. And I learned that his devotion to those things, those institutions, to those ideals, that's what I found early. And it's just a great North Star to guide you through this story. And it worked. It worked for me because that was authentic. That was what he believed in a very politically divided world.
I can tell you a story about my first conversation with Director Comey, which will tell you everything about who he is. It certainly told me. I read the book, said I'm in, and then I had to be approved by Director Comey. He had script approval. So I was going to have to audition for him. And unfortunately, it was going to have to happen over the phone, which would not be my preference. But a meeting was set via phone where I was in Los Angeles, and the producer, Shane Salerno, was in his home. And Comey was in Virginia. He had 2 book agents in DC and 2 book agents in New York. And I was basically saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to adapt it. And for the first 10 minutes, I was just crushing. I mean, everything I said, he loved. It was going so well. And then one of his book agents said, well, how are you going to handle the Hillary thing? And I said, well, I think we got to take it head on. I mean, I don't want to write an unflawed character. And, you know, dramatically, this is Frankenstein. You created the monster and the monster destroyed you. And then Comey said, how did I create the monster? I said, well, sir, you got him elected. And there was this pause. And then Comey said, you know, there were other factors. I said, that may be, but you created a 6-point swing and that was enough. And he picked me anyway. That tells me everything there is to know about James Comey, because I would not have picked me. If for some unknown reason someone wanted to tell the Billy Ray story, I would not choose a screenwriter who went into it thinking that I had inflicted Donald Trump on this country and on this planet. But Comey did. And he never, ever tried to manipulate me. He never tried to spin me. He was a resource. When I had a question, he had an answer. But his integrity just kept sort of evidencing itself in a million different ways. And at that point, I realized that this series was going to be an opportunity for us to say, be Jim Comey for 5 minutes. Here are the factors. Here's the truth. Here are the pressures he was facing. Here are the political realities. Here's what the world was saying. What would you have done? And then, of course, to make that work, you need to have an actor who can pull that off, so that we know what the inner life is and we know what the character is thinking, even when it's not in the dialogue. And that's what Jeff provided. And that was sort of the alchemy that makes those moments as compelling as they are.
Yeah, you know, it did feel a little bit like image rehab for Comey, but not on purpose. I mean, this was the first time that we see the story not from the Democratic perspective, which is, you know, this guy screwed it up for Hillary by announcing that he's opening an investigation 5 minutes before the election, or from the Republican perspective of, you know, the guy tried to screw Trump by exonerating her. So now we have it from Comey's perspective. So I think that's you know, a really valuable perspective that you guys brought.
It's the other side. It's the other side. You know, I mean, we know Trump's version, Comey lied. Okay, well, this is the other version, you know, and you can decide what's true and what isn't. That's kind of how I look at it. You know, I'm interested, Billy, because I've been asked this, and you telling Comey that he lost the election, and that's certainly what everyone thought. And I've kind of, and I don't know if I'm right on this, I came to that there were other factors, certainly, and those are displayed in the movie, which Billy wrote in. But there are other things too that you know, when it came out, and he didn't announce it, it was leaked from the Gang of Eight that it was being reopened. The media jumped on that like it was red meat, because as Billy knows, that's a great story. Hillary Clinton might be guilty, and that's bombshell. And then when it was decided that there wasn't anything there, they said there's nothing there. And that's not as good a story. That's less. Oh, she's not guilty. And they covered it, but not like they covered the initial he's reopening. It was more like a retraction on page 4 of the newspaper. And I also think that America was not informed. We were not paying attention like we are now. So there's a shared responsibility, so that by the time it was announced that there's nothing there, most everybody that ship had sailed. Everybody decided, well, she's probably guilty. I mean, whatever, I don't know. I'm voting for Trump, or I'm not voting for her, or whatever it was. It was not just Jim. There was a lot of other people, the media, the voter, the American voter themselves, not being as informed or maybe paying attention as much as they should have been. There were a lot of factors going in. Certainly Jim triggered it. I agree with that. But there were other factors. And that just comes from having played him and kind of done a deep dive on him.
One of the blessings of doing all the research that I did, you know, Comey's book was a jumping off point for me, but then I had to get on a plane and go meet a million people who had actually experienced this firsthand, some of whom were Comey detractors, by the way. But along the way, I had the opportunity to ask James Clapper, who certainly would know, what was the determining factor in the 2016 election? And without hesitation, he said it was the Russians. The Russians were the difference between Trump winning and Trump losing. And James Clapper would know. So that was something I needed to be educated about. And then as far as the Comey image rehab goes, if someone had come to me and said, let's do a biopic of Jim Comey, I would have said no. And I imagine if I would have gone backstage at To Kill a Mockingbird and said to Jeff Daniels, hey, do you want to do a biopic of Jim Comey? He would have said no. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but this was never a biopic. This was always a story about a public servant and other public servants around that person, and how difficult that can be, how heartbreaking that can be. It was more a love story between a man and an institution, but it was not a lifetime story of Jim Comey. That was not what we were doing, and that was never the intention.
I'm going to risk a guess here too, that I'm going to say that a lot of people in America, me included, had to look up the word apolitical in October of 2016. And because Jim was kind of that first apolitical public servant who had to be aware of the politics, but ignore them and dismiss them to make his decision. After Jim came people like Fiona Hill, William Taylor, Colonel Vindman, Marie Ivanovich. They were like aliens. What do you mean they're not political? What do you mean they aren't democratic? I don't get that. What are they? You know, Jim was like the first one of those, and that we need those people. And those people are, you know, the battle to be an apolitical public servant is a real battle.
There's a line in the movie. I keep interrupting you, Brian. I'm sorry, but I'll stop after. There's a line in the series where Mark Giuliano, who was Comey's former chief of staff, is talking about Comey and says, as smart as he is, his political instincts are not good. And Comey, you know, read the script and saw that line. And he sent me an email saying, do you think my political instincts are not good? And I wrote back, your political instincts are horrible. And that's how I feel. He is a very, very smart man, but I think he had no idea how poisonous the political atmosphere in 2016 actually was. And that misguided some of his instincts, I think.
Did James Comey ever come to set?
James Comey came to set one day. We were shooting the loyalty dinner, the famous loyalty dinner. It was the only scene in the entire shoot that got its own shooting day. Generally, we were shooting about 4 scenes a day, but that was 8.5 pages of dialogue. So we were taking Jeff back to his theater roots. It was also Jeff's first day working opposite Brendan Gleeson as Trump. So as degree of difficulties go, you've got 8.5 pages of dialogue, your first day working opposite Trump, who is going to be doing the bells and whistles part in this show. You've got Jim Comey on set. He brought, I think, his 18-year-old daughter, she might be 19. And I just said, oh, by the way, we don't have time to rehearse. Here's where you sit. Here's where you sit. Don't freak out. But after Trump says the line, I need loyalty, we're going to start to kill all the lights on the set so that there'll just be an overhead light. So it'll feel like you guys are on an island. Action. And as degrees of difficulty go, it may be a 9.9, but I think it's one of Jeff's best scenes in the movie. I mean, he just killed it.
It was a great day. It was film acting the way film acting is supposed to be. You don't rehearse, you shoot the first take. And you have to read each other. You have to focus on each other. I've always said to Billy, you know, half my performance is in the other actors. So get me great actors. And he did. This cast is loaded.
So let's talk Brendan Gleeson, you know, starring as Trump. What was it like casting for Trump, and why did you go this route?
Well, first, Brendan said no when we first offered it to him, for reasons that are obvious. I mean, it's a risky thing to be the first dramatic interpretation of Donald Trump. We weren't doing a sketch. We were doing something much more serious than that, and perhaps the only dramatic interpretation of Trump that there will ever be. That's a possibility. Anyway, he said no. I now know that my casting director, the great Sharon Bialy, stayed on his manager and just kept saying, Brendan needs to do this, Brendan needs to do this. That was all behind the scenes. I didn't know what was happening, but there was about a month or two where Jeff and I were talking every single day about who could play Trump, who's good enough, who's credible, who has the nerve to do it, who will read the script, who said no without reading the script. We were sort of producing together in that moment, because Jeff knew that if you have the wrong Trump, there's no show. You're dead. Thankfully, the pressure on Brendan worked, and he changed his mind without a new draft of the script. He said yes to the same script he had said no to before. He brings incredible talent, incredible physicality, great courage. I'm, you know, in love with what he did in the same way that I'm in love with what Jeff did. I mean, you could boil this entire series down to the show. This is a boxing match between two heavyweights, and Trump wins most of the rounds, but Comey wins a few. And watching those two do that dance, that's the fun of night 2.
Did Alec Baldwin, did you get those guys that expressed interest or that tried to audition, or, you know, the comedic iterations of Trump?
No. There was one moment where I thought very seriously, could Cate Blanchett do this? And people talked me down off that roof. and just said that no, no, she's a.
I had a moment. I had a moment, and I talked to Kathleen about it, and my manager, and I said, "What if I played both? Could I play both? Could we do that Patty Duke thing from way back in the '60s or '70s or whatever?" And then they both said, "Think of all the lines you'll have to learn." And I said, "You're right. Forget it."
Yeah.
That would have been awesome.
No, it would not have been. It would have been a stunt. It wouldn't have been as good. And Brendan brought something. I'll tell you what he brought. He brought a private darkness. Film acting is behind the eyes, and we enter the character through the eyes in film. And Brendan knew how to. That's why give me a great actor, because he'll know how to do that, and you get pulled in. He pulls you in, and I felt it sitting at that loyalty dinner. Just pulled me in.
You know, that day, after we had shot the first take, I looked back at Director Comey. He was right over my left shoulder. And he said, "You are ruining my day in a great way." He said, you are taking me right back to what that dinner was. And this is exactly what it felt like. And that was pretty gratifying. That was a great moment.
Yeah, that was a touchdown.
So Jeff, playing these, heroes who unwittingly walk into the center of political shitstorms has kind of become a recurring theme for you, from, Will McAvoy to Atticus Finch to James Comey. Is that on purpose?
No, it's just what's coming, and I'm so grateful it's coming. And Newsroom has triggered this whole second or third act to my career that is so gratifying to me. All I get are complicated characters where I might fail miserably, and that's the challenge at this age. It's what's keeping me interested, and Comey was exactly that. And it's, I think, McAvoy triggered all that. You start to, he can do that. Well, then maybe he can do this. It kind of dominoes. So I think I'm thrilled by it.
The arc from Dumb and Dumber to a character like James Comey is kind of like.
Well, that's just the fun of it. That's just to fuck with Hollywood. That's just to go, what do you mean he did Dumb and Dumber? Well, he can't do drama ever again. And it took a few years to be taken seriously because Dumb and Dumber was such a hit. But I always wanted to be the guy that could go from Gettysburg to Dumb and Dumber to Will McAvoy to James Comey to Atticus Finch. I love the range of it all. I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing, create characters. That was the last word I heard. So that's what I've been doing.
But, now it can be told. Jeff has been doubted at many stages of his career.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And when he was doing Dumb and Dumber, the producers on that movie were so doubtful that he could pull it off that the first couple days of his shoot on that movie were scenes that didn't have Jim Carrey in them because they were sure it wasn't going to work and that they were going to have to recast. And it took a couple days of his doing scenes without Jim for the producers to say, "Oh, no, he can absolutely do this." So the joke that Jeff's career was interrupted by having done comedy is that the people who cast him didn't think he could do comedy. And then he did.
It's true.
But by the time this came around, everybody knew he could play Comey. And everybody knew he was my first choice and the studio's first choice and the network's first choice. And the only pain in the ass was we really wanted him to get out of To Kill a Mockingbird early so that we could shoot more before the end of the year. And he insisted on completing his 1-year commitment to do this sort of Cal Ripken, consistent, dependable bullshit guy thing.
Never missed a performance in 1 year. Not one performance. I was Cal Ripken on him. I wasn't going to drop.
Right. So that meant that we had to wait until he was done November 3rd, which completely imploded our schedule, by the way, but he was worth it. So we worked around it. But that's Jeff.
I got to say, selfishly, I'm glad he did. I was lucky enough, Jeff, to check out To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway, and it was far and away the best show that I'd ever seen. So I'm sorry, Billy, but I'm glad that didn't work out.
It became a real thing. That last 2 months was just for a lot of reasons. That's usually when shows fall apart. People start to phone it in, and we had a surgical precision to that show in the end that I'm very proud of. But it meant me staying there till the very end, and I'm glad I did. And a week later, we were shooting Comey, and I relied on Billy. I was so dead tired, mentally dead. Billy was a great Comey historian. I did all the research, did all the book and the audio book and all that, and YouTube, but I relied on Billy a lot, especially that first 2 months.
Thank you. A week before we started shooting, I flew to New York. This was back in the good old days when you could still just get on a plane and fly places without a mask. And
Yeah,
I remember that. Oh.
Yeah. And I was sitting in Jeff's apartment, and his wife, who is lovely, walked by, and I said, "Do you have any advice for me?" And she said, "Yes, there will be moments where he's quiet and grumpy on the set, and you're going to think it's you. It's not you. He's just in his head." And that really helped me, especially in that first week.
Yeah.
Especially the first week, because there are moments where you give Jeff direction, and he looks at you like, "That's the fucking direction. That's what you got for me." And it's easy to take it personally, and then you realize, oh no, that's not what he meant at all. He was just sort of processing in his head, and he doesn't have that filter that says, "Oh, Jeff, nod as if something smart's just been said to you." He doesn't have that. And so if you're waiting for that as a director, you're going to be standing there for a long time.
It's usually the actor who needs the validation.
Oh no, I'm an empty shell.
God.
I absolutely need it. But also, Jeff is a very different kind of actor than any actor I've ever worked with before. Every other actor I ever worked with, the goal is to get there completely organically, to never give them a result, to never tell them what you want them to do, but just to help create the emotional space so that they can get there. And Jeff is not that way at all. Jeff will come up to you and say, "Okay, so you want me to cry on the third syllable? Is that it?" And I go, well, not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, that'd be great. Says, "Okay." And then he goes off and he finds a way to get there. It was a great learning experience for me.
What was the, and this is for both of you, best and worst day on set?
I never had a worst day on set, ever. Every day was the best day on that set for me. The cast was spectacular. The crew killed themselves for me. Everybody felt it was their civic duty to be part of this project. It was such an esprit de corps, and they felt how hard we were all working, and they knew that our schedule was impossible. We were essentially shooting 2 movies in 51 days. Tons of dialogue every single day. As I said, 4 scenes in a day, but nobody phoned it in. I mean, everybody on that crew and in that cast brought me their best every day, and it was all a joy. I know that's bad copy, but it was all a joy for me.
It's not always that way either. I mean, there are hybrid sets, mixed results of who gives a shit, who doesn't. This was not that at all. We were doing something that mattered. So every day was a good day. Certainly the loyalty dinner was a best day. I'll tell you another best day, because we had to have 3 things. We had to have a Comey, which we felt after about 6 weeks, I think we're okay. And we have to have a Trump. And then Brendan showed up and bang, there that is. And we got to have an Obama. And the day that Kingsley worked and came in with his Obama, I turned to Billy and I said, "We got it. We got it. We got the 3." That was a great day too.
The Obama thing was really critical because it's so early in the movie. It's the first big scene in the movie. And if you have an Obama that is just so, I think the movie would have lost a lot of credibility. But Kingsley came in.
Nailed it.
And he comes in and he does that Obama accent and all the mannerisms, and he gets the silence right. And he had the confidence. yes, that was that was definitely a great day. Definitely a great day.
I watched it in a room with a few people, and as soon as we heard the Obama speak, everyone was like, "Yup, that's exactly it." Just absolutely nailed it.
And
So
then you throw in what Scoot McNairy did for Rod Rosenstein, and what Holly Hunter
Oh,
does as
yeah.
Sally Yates, and what Michael Kelly does as Andrew McCabe. These are people that are recognized out there, and if you get that stuff wrong,
right.
you're in trouble. And
Yeah.
on this show, we had people like Peter Coyote showing up for a day to do Bob Mueller. I mean, we had Jonathan Banks showing up to do Clapper. This was like an abundance of riches in terms of performance, and they all delivered.
We were loaded all the way around. Yep.
So with that said, you guys were in the unique position of telling a story as it's unfolding. And so now we're seeing the same Russian influence that happened in 2016 happening again. Do you feel better or worse about the prospects of a safe and secure election this time around? Do you think we can see through the Russian disinformation campaign this time?
Well, there are two answers to that question. I look at the Democratic National Convention this time compared to what happened in 2016, where the Russian hack that was distributed through WikiLeaks kind of destroyed the 2016 Democratic Convention. Nothing like that happened this year, which tells me that either the difference maker is that Julian Assange is on the sidelines this time, or that the intel community has sort of caught up to what the Russians are doing. Those are both very, very good signs. There is, however, a counterweight to that, which I think is the ultimate bad sign, which is that this time the Russians have cooperation from within the United States government at perhaps the very highest of levels. That is daunting to me. It just so happens that I think the American people are ready for it. I think the Democratic Party and the Biden campaign and individual Senate and House campaigns are ready. I think they are lawyered up like crazy and doing what they can. But when you have a president who's willing to 86 his own post office and a postmaster general who's willing to do it, and when you have an attorney general who has decided that his job is to protect the president, not democracy, yeah, that's daunting. I don't know if we're safer than we were in 2016.
I would add that all of that. I would add also that what can we do about it? I mean, expressing outrage on social media doesn't cut it. Having politicians stand there in the Capitol rotunda and scream their outrage doesn't cut it. What can we do about it? And the first thing we can do about it is vote in large, large numbers, because America that doesn't agree with this outnumbers the white Republican Trump party that wants to remain in power, even though it's a minority, So I'm hoping that the first thing that we can take action and do, aside from the protests, is to vote in large, large numbers. Now, that doesn't mean that the Russians won't get in there and hack the machines and change the numbers. That's where I go to people smarter and more connected than I am, is that what are you doing about that? But the first thing people can do is vote.
Billy, there was some movie drama outside of the series. There was a moment where it was going to air after the election, and that was a move that you strongly opposed. Why was it so important that the series air before Election Day?
Two reasons. One is that a big part of our story is what the Russians had done to the election in 2016. Very important to get that story told before Americans go to the polls in 2020, just as a cautionary tale. But the second part of it was much more selfish for me. I had just witnessed spectacular performances by an incredible cast, and I wanted those performances to be seen. And there was no question in my mind that you air this in late September of an election year, you're going to get eyeballs. And those performances are going to get seen, as they should. You air this in late November or early January, it's a historical artifact by that point. And the audience would have been half the size. So this was a big deal for me. And I think it's lovely that people think that a letter that I wrote somehow backed off, a company the size of Viacom. I'm sure that's not true. I think they knew. It gave them some cover. I think that's what it did. I think they knew as a piece of business, this was vastly more valuable in late September than it would be after the election. So they did the right thing, and I'm grateful they did.
So, Jeff, this one's for you. Can you say in one sentence or less why America is the greatest country in the world?
I agree with Sorkin. We're not. One sentence or less. We're not the greatest country in the world, but if we were to address issues such as systemic racism that's been in the world, certainly in America, for 400 years or so, then maybe we could be the greatest country in the world. There's your one sentence.
That works for me. So do you guys have any ideas on the nickname that you're going to get from Trump at 2 a.m. on a Sunday?
If the president of the United States is tweeting to an actor at 2 a.m, something tells me that we need somebody that has, something else to do. I mean, that's a complete waste of the president of the United States time, if you ask me.
I can't imagine the president doing a greater service to this series than to tweet about it.
So, Jeff, about a year ago, you were on MSNBC. You had a pretty amazing moment where you asked who the heroes were going to be. This was during Trump's impeachment trial. We're seeing a parallel of that now. We know, for example, that Trump disparaged the troops and the Republicans have been silent. We know that Trump knew about the severity of the virus and he intentionally downplayed it. And again, the Republicans have been silent. So are we done waiting for any heroes from the GOP?
I don't know what it's going to take. Bounties on American soldiers by Russia and not responding to it at all. Calling the military losers and suckers. I don't know what they're waiting for. I really don't. Maybe you're right. Maybe it won't matter. Maybe they're in such survival mode that they're looking at the end of the Republican Party. Certainly the Republican Party my dad belonged to is gone. And a lot of those guys, who were of that persuasion, center right, resigned, got out, left, outnumbered. I don't know. I don't know I think the people that are there now, if they don't speak up, if they don't step forward, they're certainly part of the problem, but they're also as guilty as Trump is of putting party over country. I think it's shameful. I really do. But, there's still a month till the election. They have time.
Speaking of that small slice of the country, there's a small slice of the country that's still undecided. What do you have to say to those people?
I'd say get informed. Just get informed. You need to get informed. You need to know more than you do. You need to, if you're worried about Biden, you need to dig into him. You need to find out, is he better for you than Trump? Is he better for the country than Trump? That we have to start thinking of people other than ourselves. And I know that's really hard for people to do when they got their nose in their phones most of the day. But this is the time when we have to think of other people and who we want to be, who we want to become. You have to decide, you want to follow Trump or do you want to follow Biden? It's a pretty clear choice. It shouldn't be that hard to be decided about which way you want to go. One of them has decency, compassion, generosity, and caring for other people. The other one doesn't.
I would say that Trump asked for your vote in 2016 based on 4 promises. I will bring back manufacturing. Your health care will get better and cheaper. Mexico will pay for the wall, and I will drain the swamp. He had a Republican House and a Republican Senate and went 0 for 4 on those promises, which either means they were not good ideas or he's not a terribly effective leader. But either way, I would say you deserve better. And I would evaluate him strictly in terms of performance.
Yeah. Thank you guys both so much. Please, everyone, make sure to watch the Comey Rule on Showtime on September 27th and 28th. And thank you guys again, Billy and Jeff. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.